And that's it. Now, both Holiday Store and Customer Store, they don't know about each other, but in a way, they still have a possibility to communicate completely decoupled. If we're looking at the download statistics in Angular, then we can see that state management is dominated by the NgRx Global Store, which is what comes under the package name NgRx Store. On the other side, there is also the NgRx SignalStore, which grows quite fast and has currently quite a momentum. There are a few reasons for that. I would say first of all is that the SignalStore is based on the signal itself. It is very easily extensible, and it's also very lightweight. And exactly this lightweight behavior of the SignalStore is a problem for a lot of companies out there. Because they are saying we have an application which is so complicated, we need to be able to use an event-based architecture, this Redux pattern that we only get from the NgRx Global Store, even if it comes with more boilerplate code. Because with an event-based architecture, we can have a decoupling, and the SignalStore does not provide it. This was the case until now, because now with NgRx 19.2, we have an events extension as an experimental mode, and this will now change everything. And this is exactly what I want to discuss in this video. All right, so we start with our holiday component, our holiday screen. So you see that you have here a list of different holidays. I can also click here on the search, and I also have here the option to add favorites to it. Now if we go back into our code, then we see we have here our holidays component. And the holidays component, the way how it works is that at the moment it is using a holiday store. So it has already exposed all the logic to a SignalStore already. When the ng-init runs, when the component is initialized, it then also says holiday store load, so load the data, obviously. And then we also have here methods for adding, removing favorites, but of course also then here for the search. The holiday store, as I said before, is already using a SignalStore. So if you are not aware with the SignalStore, we're going to refactoring it here. But if you want to have an introduction, then there are some other videos which I did in the past. And in the SignalStore, we see that the load, the search, the add favorite, the remove favorite, these are all simple methods. And that also means that the method is the one that our components are using when they want to interact with the SignalStore, obviously. And the methods are also those parts which are then also able to update the state. This is not going to change if we want to use the events extension, because from now on, we need to split this into multiple pieces. We have events, we have a reducer, and we have an effect. So our components are using events. They are dispatching events when a certain thing needs to happen, for example, like a load event. Then inside of the SignalStore, these events can be consumed. So we can define how the SignalStore should react to these events. And there are two types. We can use effects, which means an effect has access to the dependency injection, and an effect is also allowed to use asynchronous tasks. So the effect could, for example, then communicate with our backend. The second one is the reducer. The reducer does not have access to the dependency injection, and the reducer is also not allowed to do any asynchronous tasks. So what the reducer is doing, the main responsibility is that the reducer is updating the state, because this is what the effects usually cannot do. So if I want to refactor now my holiday store to events, then as the name already says, I have to come up with events first. So I go here at the very beginning and I say I have holiday events. And I have then a so-called event group. And this event group is now coming from the Signal events namespace. So I say here add NgRx signals, and then we have here our events. The event group, as the name says, is a group for multiple events. And in the beginning, I also should come up with a source. So I say here, this is about the holidays. And then I'm providing a list, that's not a list, it's an object literal of all the events that should happen. So I have an event for load, and this load event doesn't have any payload. So what we want to do as a component, we just want to say you just load and nothing else. That's why I need to say here, okay, the load comes without any context. So in the end, it is more or less void, and we're using here the type method for that. Type method also needs to be imported, and the load will then be consumed by the effect. And once the effect has loaded the data, the effect will then also dispatch another method, another event, which is called loaded, and that loaded will then contain the holidays. So I say here I have then another one, which is then type again, but this time we have here an holiday array. An holiday array, I'm just calling it, and we start with that. So I would then say here holiday events, and you see already that the load and the loaded methods are already available, and those could now be dispatched by our component. So I'm also going to export this here. Then I'm going back into my holidays component. And now we leave the reference to the holidays store, but now we say we have something new, which is a dispatcher. Yeah, that's now a new service, which also comes via the signals events extension. And with this dispatcher, I could now say in the init, this dispatcher, dispatch, and now I'm accessing my events, my holiday events, and I say, I want you to dispatch the load event, which means I don't have to call this method anymore because we will also then remove it. Yeah, so this means now my component is just dispatching an event, and it could not be the case that multiple signal stores react to it, that maybe just one reacts to it, or that no one reacts to it. We don't know. We are just dispatching here events. So I'm going back into my holiday store, and there I would now first of all start with the effects. So I would say, yes, we want to now listen to certain events. So I'm having here my store, and then I say, I want, before I'm going to return anything, I want to have access to the events. And the events is now also another service. So we have already seen dispatcher, and events also exists. Not the one from leaflets, but the one from SignalStore events. And then I'm returning an object literal, as it is tradition in the SignalStore, where the properties are defining the events that I want to listen for. So I say here, I want to listen for the load event. So I say here load $, because it's going to be an observable. And I say here events. The events have an on method, and there I'm providing the holiday events load method. So I say this is the one that I want to listen to. Yeah, and then I have just a simple pipe where now I can come up with a concat map, exhaust map, switch map, whatever I want. I say, yeah, let's just go with the exhaust map, would be maybe better here, because there isn't really any context. It's just about loading things. And the exhaust map, what it does is once it starts with the loading process, it ignores any other loading request. So if now 5 different components would dispatch the load event, then we only load once. In order to do that, of course, I also need to have access to my HTTP client. So I'm going to inject that one here as well. And well, then I just say, okay, we want to go to our client. We have the get method. That one is going to return us a holiday array. And I also now have to provide here the URL. Okay, but we are not done yet, because what I have to do now is I cannot update the state. So the state is defined here. I have here my holidays. I need to dispatch now the loaded event. And in order to do that, I'm going to use here another pipe because I want to use the map response. I could also just pipe after the exhaust map. That would have also been an option. But with the map response, we can also kind of deal with errors in the proper way. So that's why I'm using here map response, which comes from NgRx operators. Now the map response says, okay, you are getting here flights from your request, and what I would now expect from you is that you are providing me with a next callback. So like this, something like this. And then I can say here, well, if the flights are coming along, then I want to just dispatch the loaded event, and I'm providing here the flights. And since the next is not enough, we also need to provide here an error where I just say console error. Okay. So the flights have here a problem. Yeah, of course, we need to provide them like, flights. It's not flight, it is of course holidays. I'm used to work with the flights all the time. So we are saying here holidays, and now it's a little bit better. Next thing, we need to care about the loaded event. And as I said before, this is now the place for the reducers. So we add right after the effects, we then come up here with reducer. And with the reducer, that's then actually very, very simple. You see here also in the JS doc, the with reducer just wants to have multiple calls of the on. So I'm saying here, on. So I want to listen for a certain event. It's almost the same as it is with the effects. I want to listen to holiday events loaded. And then the idea now is that I'm going to return here a new partial state. Yeah, so I'm getting here, so I'm providing here a callback function. That function gives me the complete event. Could call it like this. And then I need to say, okay, since we are loading here the holidays, I'm just overwriting the holidays of my state, and I keep the favorites and the filter as it was already. I'm not going to change it. So I'm providing here only a partial state. So I say here holidays, and then I can say here event payload, and in this case, the payload is already or are already the holidays themselves. We see the whole thing here is very type safe. So if I would provide here a different type, or if I would use different properties, then it would throw a compilation error. What I very often do is that I'm not calling it payload, but I say I'm accessing the payload by using the deconstructor, and I'm using an alias. So I say I want to access the payload, but I want to use the name holidays for them. Which means I have it here a little bit easier because I just provide an object literal with holidays. And that's already the first part, more or less. We just need to make sure that the request is also working fine, because I see here all the time in the terminal that something is going wrong. And I think that's because the URL is the wrong one, right? It should just be holiday and not holidays. It also means that we can now go back to our methods, and I can say there, I don't need to load anymore. I'm just going to remove it. From now on, everyone who wants to load should dispatch the event. Let's go back to our application. We see the holidays are there. So this loading process now by using the events was successful. And I would now continue to do the same thing then also for the favorites, adding favorites, removing favorites, and probably also for the search. That's going to be very simple, I would say. So we know first step is always we need to add something to the events. So I say here add favorite, and I say what I want to have is just a number. So the payload in this case should just be of type number, This is more or less the holiday ID. I also would then say remove favorite, which is another number. And as you see, I don't add favorite successful or favorite added, because I'm doing this without synchronizing with the backend. So I'm just changing the state and that's it. We also have a search, by the way. So just to be sure that we also support this, I say here type search. And if we look at the method of search, then we see that it has been in the past, it comes with two parameters, query and query of type string, and also type. And I have to change this here a little bit, because the type in the type function can only have, there is only one type available. So I need to say here, we have a query, which is a string, and then we also have here a type, which is a number. So we are providing the search parameters, and this is an object literal. Good. Well, and then we can already move on. So we would then say, okay, here when a favorite is added, I want to deal with it here. So I say here again, holiday events, add favorite. We know that the payload in the favorite is already the actual holiday ID. Add favorites. No, that's not it. We need to return here, of course, something. This now looks a little bit better. But now we have a little bit of a problem. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, we also need to close this one here. We have now a little bit of a problem, because we need to have now access to the state itself. Because if I want to add a favorite, I want to add the ID, but not replace the other favorite IDs, which I already have in my state. Yeah, so remember, we have here our state with the favorite IDs. So what I can do here is that in the reducer, I don't just have to provide here a partial of the state of an object literal that I want to update. I can also provide here a simple function. And the advantage of returning a function is that I have then access to the current state. Yeah. So this means I have here another function which I then return. And now I have access to the current state. I can also access the favorite IDs, which I'm going to do now, favorite IDs. And then I say, the only thing that I want to change are again the favorite IDs. I'm going to use the existing ones, and then I'm just adding the new holiday ID to it. In this case, let's just not name it holiday ID. Let's just say that's an ID. And then we are almost done. Yeah. So we see here also immutable state updates are necessary. You can't just mutate the state, because in the end, it's a signal. And what I maybe want to do here differently is that I want to deal with the case that the ID is already available in the favorites ID. So I don't want to add it multiple times. For that, I will then just create here an if condition where I say, look, if our favorite IDs already include the ID, then we don't need to do anything. Then I'm just returning here an empty object, which means I don't want to change anything. Otherwise, please return here these favorite IDs. And in the same manner, I'm doing it now also the remove favorite. So I say here, okay, we are listening then here to the remove favorite. We have again a certain ID. And in this case, I say if this favorite IDs is not included, if this ID is not included already, then I can just return as an empty array, an empty object. Otherwise, I'm going to go over my favorite IDs, and I provide here a filter where I say, okay, favorite ID, and I'm only passing it on if the favorite ID is not the one that I have just received. Okay. And now let's give it a try in the component. So I'm going back. we have here our dispatch. We have already done this. And here in add favorite, I now again go to the dispatcher. I say dispatch, holiday events, add favorite, and I'm providing here the ID. Then I'm doing the same thing here for remove favorite. Also for search, dispatcher, dispatch, holiday events, search. Remember, the query is now search and the type is now number. This type we are using here an object literal. This one can stay, no, this one cannot stay. We also need to say here this dispatcher, dispatch, holiday events, remove favorite ID, or in this case it's holiday and just ID. Okay. Now we go back again to our holiday store and we are going to remove more or less the complete methods. Yeah. So I can really then scroll up here to with methods because they have now all been replaced with effects and reducers. And yeah, let's check it out if it is actually working. So I'm reloading my page. Holidays are still there. And I'm clicking here on this icon and we see that it works. So I can add and I can also then remove favorites. It looks like there is some bug with the removing part because only that one stays. I'm sure you have seen already the issue. So we need to look out for our reducer and we say, no, the one that we want to remove, that one is not passed on. So again, click. And then I say here, remove that one. And now it is working. We are not done yet. There are a few things that I want to show you first. Let's go back to our holiday component. And you see that, of course, with the dispatching, I always need to call dispatch and then provide the event. There is now a utility function which could improve the developer experience here significantly. And the way how it works is that you can say read-only events or whatever name you want. And you are then using a function which is called injectDispatch. And with this injectDispatch, you are providing then the events that you want to be able to dispatch here in this component. And this means that we can now, instead of using the dispatcher, we can now use the events. And I can say, I just call here the method, and I would then, for example, just say load. And you see what I meant with improving developer experience, reducing actually the amount of code that we have here. We don't need to call the dispatcher anymore. So I can then also then remove the dispatcher and use the shortcut, so to say. So events, we have here add favorite. You see it's the same signature. We are just providing here the ID, just shorter. Same is then also true for remove favorite. Also here the ID. And also then of course for the search. So can then also say here these events. Use this part here. Is there something missing? Yes. And then also here just the events, remove favorite, and can then also remove here that part. When we are using events, then we probably are dealing with more global state management. The logic is much more complicated, which very often means we also have way more code that we see here. And in these cases, it would be important if you split up your file into, again, multiple pieces, multiple files. And that is possible because first candidate are already the events. No one is saying you need to put the events into the holiday store. I can just say, okay, I have here a new file and I call that one holiday events TS. And then I'm just taking my holiday events from here and putting them here. Of course, I also need then to import all my dependencies again. Let's check if it was able to catch all of them. No, the type is actually coming from NgRx signals only. Yeah, this looks better. Then I can go back into my SignalStore and I just need to make sure that I'm importing here the holidays events and also inside of my component, of course. So here they are away, and here we are going to import them again. First step, first extraction of events. Next one is the extraction of the effects. So what do we actually need? It's only that part here. So what can I do? Well, I just create a new file and I say these are the holiday effects TS. Or maybe let's not call it holidays effects. Let's stick to the terminology of our SignalStore, because in the end, the effects should just be another SignalStore feature. And features in generally start always with a with. So I say here with holiday effects. That's the proper way. So I'm saying here I want to export a function holidays effects. Holiday effects like this. Then I'm returning a SignalStore feature, and I'm taking the complete effect as it is. I'm cutting it out and pasting it here in, and then again we have to do the import thing. So add all missing imports. Also holiday events should actually already be there, but it looks like we have another issue. Here are the events. It's the wrong ones. So there we are. And it looks like we have it. So I'm going back to my holiday store. And there I just then say with holiday effects, call it, and everyone is happy again. File has been shortened, and I have then a very readable feature in this case. And the last thing is that I, of course, then also now have to delegate or to extract the reducer. I'm doing this by saying with holiday reducer. So a new file with holiday reducer TS, export function with holiday reducer. But now we will see it's not so easy, but not really hard. So I'm taking here this reducer, again, cutting it out, putting it in here. And the problem, or let me quickly import all the dependencies there. So it's always the on, which makes the problem. Right. We see here the reducer has a problem because the reducer needs to update the state. But now the issue is that the reducer is completely isolated from the SignalStore, so it has no idea what state we actually have. And for that, we have to provide a state type, which we then also pass on to the reducer, and then it will again just work. The way how we do that is that I'll go back into our holiday store. I am saying here we have our state, and I'm going to call that one the holiday state. And we say we have first of all the holidays, which is an array of holiday. We then have our favorite IDs, which is an array of numbers. And then we have our filter, where I say, well, there is a query of type string, and the type is then also a number. Then we have our initial state, which is the holiday state, obviously. And there, I mean, I don't have to create the initial state, but it's just, again, that's the way how we have been doing it since I can imagine that NgRx exists. So we are saying here holidays is empty, the favorite IDs are also empty, and for the filter, the query is an empty string. like this. And the type is then, let's just say 0. And then I can replace this object literal with my initial state, first thing. And since the type of the state is now known, is now very explicit, that's the right way to say it, I can go back into my reducer. And in my reducer, in my SignalStore feature, I can now say, look, this with holiday reducer can only be applied to a SignalStore which contains the state of the holiday state. The way how I do it is that as in the first parameter, I can provide here again that type. We know that one already. And in this case, the type is used to define a precondition, a constraint for the input, so to say. So I can say here, I have a state, or I require a state, which is of type holiday state. That has to be there, otherwise I want to see a compilation error. Now we see all of a sudden the holiday reducer changes, everything now works, because the return types of all our on functions, or of the state that we have here, kind of matches the state. And in our holiday store, well, the only thing that is left is that we say here with holiday reducer. We're just calling it, save it, and then we have one particular problem. Let me quickly verify what that is. So it took me a little bit more time than I actually want to admit. And to be honest, the error is something which is also documented. So let me quickly go back to the reducer. Whenever you use a type, whenever you use an input constraint, then please provide here that type at the beginning. If you do that, and if I now go back to the SignalStore, we see now everything is working. That is because of some things, how TypeScript works, some kind of limits of TypeScript. But please remember this, whenever you have a SignalStore feature with input constraints, you wanna provide the underscore to the type. The way how it usually should be is that you have also ESLint running, ESLint with fix. When you save something, that also ESLint runs and fixes those errors. And there is a fixable rule which would then make sure that you don't forget it and would fix it for you. Good, so we now see that there is a very easy option to split up our holiday store when we're using the events to multiple files. We have seen that we can do this with the events. We have seen that we can create an own file for the reducer, and we have also seen that the same also works for the effect. In the end, we keep this here in one directory and in our component. So the holidays component would then only, of course, communicate with the holidays events and would dispatch them. Would I now say that this is a perfect use case to use the events plugin? Honestly, no. Because in this case, we are talking here about local state management. I mean, there is this holidays component. Yes, it has certain subcomponents, but the state that the holiday store is managing only applies to this part of the application. So I would not use event-based events for that. Even if you would not say, yeah, but this is not local state management because the holiday store is actually provided globally. Yeah, but it doesn't change a thing that it still only applies to a certain part of our application. A more proper use case for events might be when it comes to dependencies between signal stores. So at the moment, it's just component communicates with SignalStore. But you could also have a SignalStore which depends on the state of another one. Let me show you something. So I'm going back to our application. There we are. And there is this customers item or this customers feature. And as an end user, I have here the possibility to select a certain customer. Now, what if I say, if I'm selecting a customer, then I don't want that the favorites are kept in the holiday store. The holiday store should reset itself. Not by removing the holidays, but by removing the favorites. And I don't want that the holiday store and the customer store, they know that they both actually exist. I want to keep them completely independent. And this would be, in my opinion, a perfect use case for an event. So what I would do in this case is that I would see the event as something more globally. So it's not like if I would now create an event which the customer store would then dispatch, that I would put this event into the customer store directory, but I would really treat the event as something which is shared. It could be shared globally. It could also be shared on a domain level, but in our case, let's just say it's shared globally. So we have here already a shared folder that I usually use for that kind of stuff. I'm creating then here in events, and I say, okay, look, there is a file which is called global events. And I say, because whenever I change a customer, I say I want to have now a new event which is called customer changed. Since it's a single event, I only need to use here the event function itself without the event group. I say then here, well, yeah, that's global. That's the normal way how we do it. That we have here a prefix, and then I say customer changed. I could now come up also with a payload if I want to, but in my case, I really see this as a reset event. Yeah, like something has changed, something very important has changed in my application, which would cause a listening signal store to reset itself. That's why I would say here that the payload here again is a void. For obvious reasons. I mean, you know how it works. You can always, if you want to, come up here with some payload. For me, let's just say it's not important. So, as I said before, the customer store is now the one who's going to dispatch event. So the customer store is not aware that the holiday stores exists. Maybe there are other stores as well, but the customer store now is in charge to send out the message. Customer store, luckily, has also been implemented with the SignalStore. And you see here that we have here a selected ID. And what I want to do, whenever the selected ID is going to change, I want to dispatch the particular event. Careful now the way how you do it. I mean, I could now go to my methods of my customer store, or if it's also using events, it's even easier. But there is somewhere a select and an unselect. Yeah. So here you have these two methods, and I would not start to dispatch the event here because I don't know if these will stay the only two methods which are changing the selected ID. I will directly go to the signal itself. And I will not create an effect, but I will make use of the signal method, which can track a signal for us automatically. And I'm going to use the hooks for that, because whenever the customer store is instantiating, I want to register the signal method, and I want to say whenever the selected ID is going to change, I want you to dispatch that event. So what do I do? So we have here our on hooks. We have our store. We have here the on init, and then I say, okay, I have now a signal method. I want to listen to an undefined or a number. So that's the type of my signal, so to say. Yeah, quick check. So you see here, this is the type of selected ID. And whenever that one changes, then I want to dispatch something. So I need to use here also the dispatcher. Dispatcher, inject dispatcher. And then I say, okay, dispatcher, dispatch, customer changed. Like this. So now I have access to the global events, obviously. Of course, I now need to connect things together because the signal method doesn't know to which signal it should track. And that's why I just call it here and say store selected ID. Have to be careful. I should not call the selected ID. I'm just passing on the signal, and then the signal method will do the rest for me. So now we know whenever the customer is going to change that we are dispatching that event. So I can now go back to my holiday store. And now I have to find now the right place where I'm resetting my favorites. Well, I can go to my reducer in this case because I'm updating the state. And I can say, okay, I have here another one. There we are. And I say when customer changed, then I want to return favorites IDs which are empty. I don't care about the payload of my customer change. This is because there is nothing. I just want to say this is a reset thing. So I want to kind of empty my favorite IDs. By the way, if you would have multiple effects which are consumed or processed by the same reducer, multiple events, then you can also do this. So if you would say you have here something like reset favorites, which is again type void, then you can just provide it here like a second parameter, holiday events, and then you can say here reset favorites. This will also work, yeah, just in case you have this situation. And that's it. Now both holiday store and customer store, they don't know about each other, but in a way they still have a possibility to communicate completely decoupled. Let's give it a try. So at the moment I can click here on these three holidays. They are now all part of the holidays, a part of the favorites. I go back home, I go back to holidays. We see the state stays. It's globally managed in this case. Unless I go to customers, I'm not changing the active customer. I now go back to holidays and we see the favorites have gone. Perfect. So the former case was not something where you would say you absolutely have to use it. You absolutely have to use events. You could have also done it differently by using direct dependencies. So your holiday store could actually do the same thing that I did in my customer store, like using here a hooks. So I could then say, okay, I also want to have here some hooks. Then I say here on init. And if I want, I can always inject the customer store directly here. Customer store. And the customer stores then also gives me access to the selected customer, selected ID, selected customer. Both are available there. And if there is nothing like sheriff or NX dependency rules, which kind of hinder me from importing or from having a dependency there, then I could also solve this problem like this. It always depends on your personal preferences, or maybe even more on the complexity or on the size of the application that you're working with. Having dependencies between signal stores is, in my opinion, not something which is a bad thing. It only starts to become bad if we reach a certain threshold where you are kind of depending on anything, on everything, and then of course you are losing the complete control over your application. And this is then where the eventing with the decoupling could really help you. I have another use case for an event, and I would say here the event is probably a little bit more fitting. Because what we had here so far was something where a state changed, and the state change was then actually used as an event to trigger a state change somewhere else. You could also have a different use case where I say, well, state change is a little bit of a problem with signals because there is this glitch-free effect, and I don't want to kind of communicate that particular event by first updating a state. I want to communicate the event as an event. So I want to stay at the event level. And in our case, we have something where it might be usable. Let me show you the thing with remove all favorites. Yeah? So let's say again, we have here our 3 favorites. And you see, whenever I click on it, then we are getting here some kind of a message. So it always says what kind of favorites there are. And the responsible element in our application here is the tracker store. Yeah, so the tracker store here says I'm providing you with a method, a log method. It also comes here with a signal method. You give me a signal, which is going to change. I'm doing again the tracking on my own. And then I'm just printing out the message of whatever you have given me. And in our case, we are using the favorite changes to log, or we're using actually the changes of the favorite IDs in the holiday store together with the tracker store. The binding element in our application is the app component, which is something I don't like. Yeah, so if you do that kind of stuff in the app component, it should already raise certain question marks. But you see here the app component is injecting both stores. It is in this case creating here a new favorite log. So it accesses again the favorite IDs from the holiday stores. From that value, it generates a derived value, which is the log message. And then it calls here the log method, which means whenever the favorite ID are going to change, that a new log message should show up. So, and now we have here this situation that I mentioned before. We have here an event which first goes. The event can be an add favorite or a remove favorite. This event goes into a state first. It goes into a signal first. And from there on, the change of that signal is another event which is then moved on or passed on to the tracker store. So we have a mapping between an event to a state, to a signal, and then again to an event. And the problem now, this middle mapping to the state underlies now the so-called glitch-free effect, which means if the state changes synchronously multiple times, then we have not just the risk, but there is a certainty that only the last change in the synchronous execution is being consumed, in this case by our tracker store. If you're fine with it, good. But if you say, no, I want to see all the events, then you need to find another way, namely not going from an event to a state, but just passing on the event directly. I go to my holidays component that we're getting a little bit of a better picture what I mean. You see here there is a remove all favorites. If I would now have 3 different favorites added, then this function here, events remove favorite, this event is now triggered 3 times synchronously, which means we would have 3 changes to the state. But in the end, if somebody is watching the state, if we have an effect somewhere, then this effect only runs once. But I actually want to have 3 events because I'm changing the state 3 times, which is not the case right now. So we see here again 3 different favorite IDs. I click on remove all favorites. And now I would expect 3 console logs coming from my tracker store. No, there is just one. There is only the last one. The first 2 have just been dropped. And in this case, you really have a problem, especially if you need the first ones as well. And here I would say events are the perfect place for it. We are not using the state as an intermediate layer, but we are passing on the events to other signal stores as well. And it's even better because we don't have to do all this boilerplating in the app component. We're just dispatching the event and that's it. Let's see how we can do this. So in the end, our tracker store says, I'm providing an event. And now again, we can have this discussion. it's shared. Should we put it into a global events or should we put it into the tracker store? Yeah, let's put it into global events. So it doesn't really matter in this case because both of them are shared. Yeah, but usually if you say no, it has to be in the tracker store, I'm also not mad at you. So I would then say here I have an event, which is, let's just call it track. And I see here event, it's again something global, or let's just call it your track or log message, something like this. It's more like a command and not really like an event. And then I would say here log message. In this time we have again a little bit of a payload. So I see here again we have our type, but this time the type has a message which is a string, and it also has a type, you know, the usual ones, info, debug, racing, whatever you want to have. And this is then the log message. So this log message event, let me quickly check here, this is the right way. This log message event is then consumed by our tracker store. So I can now go here and I can now say, okay, what do I now want to use? Because I still want to provide here the log as a method. I don't want to kind of close that one now. You could not say, well, you're using here a reducer. Yeah, but in the reducer, you're supposed to return a new state. In our case, we are doing more like a side effect. So in this case, I would use just with effects. So I say here with effects, we have our store, and then we just say, okay, look, we have the log, and that one comes from the events. Let's do the alternative approach when it comes to injecting dependencies. So we have here events as the second parameter. Right, good. And then I can say events on log message. Then I want to have a pipe, and in this pipe I want to have a tab, and in that tab I get here my payload, or however I want to call it, and I'm then calling then the store log with it. So I say here you have your payload, just take it. Unfortunately it's not the payload yet, but now it is. Here we are missing a comma, and now we are also listening to these log message events. So if we now go back to our app component, we can now say all that stuff, this computed and this effect and all that stuff, yeah, let's just get rid of it. We don't need to do this anymore. We can also use remove the tracker store and the holiday store. But what is more important, that in my holiday store, I now have to make sure when the favorite IDs are going to change, that I'm dispatching this event. Now I can't do it again with the signal method, because then again I'm going into the signal, into the state space. I now really have to go to my events, add favorite, remove favorite, and I would not say, do we have them somewhere? No, we don't have them. So I would then say here add favorite $, where's the events on, holiday events, add favorite, and then I would say, I'm now making it very short, pipe map. Don't really care about the actual console or about that the message is the correct one. I'm then just saying log message here, and look, you're getting a message which says hello, and for me it's just important that now the message shows up 3 times. That's the important thing. And the type would then also be an info. I'm doing the same then also for my remove favorite. So here again, I wouldn't say I need the same thing here again. And now it should work. So if I now go back and I'm selecting here these three favorite IDs and I'm clicking on remove all favorites, then we don't see anything. Wonderful. Because that happens when somebody copies and pastes all the time. Not the best idea. I should have seen this already before because the console log also was shown twice. But yeah, again, let's say now remove all favorites. We know now that the remove favorite is called 3 times. And we also see them this here in the log as well. So again, this is now a perfect use case when you absolutely have to use events, when you don't want to kind of go from an event into a state and then back to an event again. And if you say the glitch-free effect is not something for you, you really need to be able to consume all the events. So you have now seen what you can do with the events extension. The question is, when should we now really use it? In my opinion, I would say the main use case is when you want to migrate from the global store to the SignalStore. And then I would highly recommend you to re-evaluate if this event-based architecture, this Flux, this Redux, however you want to call it, is worth it. Most of the applications that I see, they are also very happy by using local state management, like the way how the SignalStore was before. And let's face it, we don't reach 100% decoupling. I mean, yes, whenever we are dispatching actions, we don't know what kind of stores process these events. But in the end, every component needs to show something. So somebody, again, needs to inject this signal store in order to fetch the data from there, to get access to that signal. So this is again where the coupling comes back again. I've also brought this example with when it comes to interstore dependencies that we can then really decouple. I would say yes, that is a valid use case. If you don't want to have dependencies from one store to another ones, absolutely yes. In the last example, where we went from event to state to event back, then we saw the glitch-free effect was a problem. And then we again used events to stay on the event level with the logging feature. I would say that this is something which might in practice not be such a problem. So in my case, if I remove all the favorites and I'm getting one log message at the end that says all the favorites have been removed, then I'm happy. I don't need these intermediate messages as long as I get the guarantee that I'm getting the last one. But again, that is my opinion. I guess you're old enough. You're responsible for your own application. You know what is best for you. You have seen what you can do with events. But still, if you say, no, in my case, I have a certain use case or use cases where I need these events, I would be very curious to hear about them. So it would be really great if you would just add a comment and tell me what this is all about. Other than that, as always, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, then please just ask. And if you subscribe, if you like the video, would also be very great. Other than that, thanks again and see you in the next video. Goodbye.